Hello, year 10. We're all missing you at the minute then. Obviously, you're off and hopefully you are working away in Google Classroom and doing lots of work. And just today then, what I want to do is I want to introduce you into a new topic. Okay, we're going to study the topic then of variation today. We're going to learn a little bit then about how and why you're different from your friends and your family and how this information is passed on in the form of DNA. So bear with me and we'll learn more about this and then I'll tell you what to do after that. Okay, then year 10, let's learn about then variation. Now, if we think about ourselves and everyone who's in our class, everyone who's in our school and everyone's across the world, we're all different. We all have different appearances. Now what I have here is I have a little picture which shows then lots of different people and how these people all look different. Okay, this girl, for example, looks very different from this girl, and this man looks very different then from this man. So we're saying we all have differences, whether it be differences in hair color, whether it be differences in height, or differences in weight, or whether it be differences in hair color, or shape of our nose, or even the shape of our lips. Everything's different. Everybody is different. We want to learn a little bit then about how these differences then take place. So we want to know then, for example, what causes variation. This picture here, a picture then of my ex-girlfriend, and you can see then she looks very different from some other people. Now, if we think about what causes variation, well, we really have two main things which cause variation. One of those things then is genetics, and the other one of these things is the environment. So what somebody is like, or what a plant is like, or what a bacterium is like, depends upon two things. It's genetics and the environment. So let's learn a bit then about genetic factors and also a bit then about environmental factors. We start off then with genetic variation. This is information which is passed then down from your parents then to you. We choose a famous example of that. Well, we've got then, of course, on the left hand side we have in fact then Prince Charles and his son, of course, Prince William. Now again, if you have a look at these two pictures here, you can see there's quite a big similarity between Prince Charles and Prince William, whether it be then the shape then of their faces, the shape of their ears, whether it be the shape of their faces. So these are all then things which have been passed on then by genetics. Now obviously there are a few differences, okay? Sometimes somebody might have a beard, sometimes somebody might not have a beard. That's a decision which they make, but their appearance, their overall appearance, their height and their size and lots of different things about them, a lot of that is caused then by genetics. An even clearer example is when you compare people. And maybe the picture, I'm going to show you two pictures here. One picture will be then of the father taken then about 30 years ago, and the one then on the right then is showing what his child looks like now. So you can see then that the father when he was young and his son look very, very similar. Okay, and it's quite clear sometimes to see exactly who the parents were. I'm sure we've all heard we look like our father or our mother. Of course, that's because then we share the same DNA. We'll learn more about DNA though in a few minutes. Now, if we think about then some characteristics which are passed on in our genes, well, example then of course is tongue rolling. Now something which I cannot do and yet both my kids can do is roll your tongue. Now you can't train yourself to roll your tongue. Really, you're born with genetics which tells you can roll your tongue or tells you you can't roll your tongue. As much as I try, and I have tried, as much as I try, I can't actually roll my tongue. So tongue rolling is something which is passed on genetically. Now, well, we have another famous example, of course, about eye color. Again, it's maybe we're being a bit simplistic here, but if we think about eye color, you'll find, of course, that we've got different shades of eyes. You've got blue eyes, you've got brown eyes, you've got grey eyes, hazel eyes, lots of different eye colors. And mainly your eye color is mainly passed down by genetics. Now, a question I'm always asked in this section then is how come you know somebody who has got one brown eye and one blue eye? And again, that can happen. It doesn't normally happen, but of course it can happen. And that's normally because the person's blue eye hasn't actually then expressed the correct color, the brown color, and therefore then they have different colored eyes. But normally, of course, your eyes are the same color, and that's passed then down from your parents. So eye color is another example of one which is a genetic characteristic. Now, let's move on then to some things are caused by the environment, i.e. the conditions in which the person lives, or the plant lives, or the bacterium lives. These are things caused then by the environment, things which have happened during the person's lifespan. Now, a very clear example, of course, is someone's suntan. Now, if you live in an area where it's very hot, if you move to Africa, for example, you'd find that within a few years your skin would be very, very dark. Whereas we live somewhere very cold, let's say you took a trip into Antarctica and stayed there, again, your skin color would get a lot paler. So suntan certainly is something which is caused then by the environment. Now, there are a few. These flowers here, these flowers are called hydrangeas. And these flowers then are very unusual because these flowers with different colors depending upon which soil they grow in. So if they grow then in acidic soils, what happens in fact then is that they grow blue flowers. However, if you plant these plants in alkaline soils, you're going to find that the flowers produced are pink. So again, this is quite an unusual example of how variation is caused then by the environment. Now, here's one example here for you. Now, what do I mean by these two pictures here? Well, another one which is caused by the environment then is scars. If you don't understand those pictures, I'm not going to tell you. So we say then that variation can be either genetic or it can be then environmental. Now, as well as that, there's two kinds of, or two types of variation. And so we mentioned then genetic factors. We've mentioned then also environmental factors. But again, we've got this other idea of, as well as having different types of variation. So genetic variation can either be what's called continuous, or it can be called discontinuous. The same way environmental variation can sometimes, and not often, can sometimes be either continuous or discontinuous. So let's learn about these kinds of variation. Let's think first of all. Okay, let's think about continuous variation. The continuous variation, there is no distinct categories. Okay, an example here is height. If I show you a picture of different people here, I have to confess I have no idea who a lot of these people are. Okay, I recognize a few people. There's Idris Elba. We also have a few people in here. We've got, I'm not even sure who most of those people are. Okay, but again, we've got this picture here then of lots of different men. Okay, someone's, in fact, I do know there's a boy from Guardians of the Galaxy. There's Loki, I think, as well. But again, I have no idea who most of these people are. I'm sure you know who they all are. But again, this shows continuous variation. And you can see then what has happened, in fact, then is we've got this kind of gradual trend then from small then to tall. Okay, there's no distinct groups. You can't say everybody there is small and everybody there is tall. There's kind of a continuous, we'll call it a spectrum, a continuous spectrum from the smallest person up to the tallest person. There's no distinct categories. Example then of continuous variation is, of course, in a weight. Again, you're not very heavy or very light. There's lots of things in between, of course. Then, so weight again shows an example then of continuous variation. Then we look at the other one. The other one then we say was discontinuous variation. Okay, now continuous variation then is where we either can do it or you can't do it. We mentioned the example from earlier on. We say tongue rolling. You either can roll your tongue or else you can't roll your tongue. Okay, there's nothing really in between then. So tongue rolling is an example then of discontinuous variation. Another example might be then the number of eggs then which a chicken lays. Okay, there's not half an egg. Okay, there's 4 eggs, there's 3 eggs, there's 2 eggs. There's no kind of middle ground here. So again, there's distinct groups here. Okay, distinct groups. Then about blood groups. In terms of blood groups, there's different blood groups. You're normally either AB, you are A, you are B, or else you're O. Okay, there is a slightly different version where you have then you might be rhesus positive, so you can be AB positive, or you might be rhesus negative, so you're AB negative. But again, you're no really in between then. So really, you're only one of a small number of different groups in terms of blood types then. Now, when we're plotting different kinds of variation, we need to use different graphs. So if we are plotting, for example, if we're plotting then, for example, here of continuous variation, what we do is we plot continuous variation on histogram. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, what is histogram? Remember in maths, you've used histograms, I'm sure, before. Histograms then are where you plot then the bars and there's no spaces between the bars. Again, we have bars, yes, kind of represents then the height of the person and the number of people of different heights. So we went across then, maybe all of year 10, we got the height of every single person in year 10. And what we did was we did this kind of frequency measurement of all these things. You're going to find a lot of people, or some people might be very, very small. Some people might be very, very tall, but most people then are somewhere in the middle then. Okay, now what we can do is we can draw a line then, which kind of shows then the pattern. You're going to find a line a bit like this one here then. So again, we're using a histogram for this one here. Normally then we have lots in the middle and some at some end, some at the other end, but most people are found in the middle. Okay, what's called a normal distribution, but let's not go there. So that's then is continuous variation plotted on histogram. If we think about discontinuous variation, well, again, you have distinct categories. Okay, there's nothing in between, you have distinct categories, and therefore we can plot these then on a bar chart or a bar graph. Okay, so here we have here, again, we've got some people are blood type AB, some are type B, some are type A, some are type O. So again, there's nowhere in between. So basically you can see there's a gap then between the bars here then. Okay, so therefore you plot then discontinuous variation then on a bar chart. Now, what we have here is we have a wee kind of diagram here, and again, if you have a look at a few examples here, continuous variation, we say then there's no distinct categories. Okay, it tends to be quantitative. Basically means that you have a number with it then. So basically you have somebody might be, say, 153 centimeters tall, or it can be some kind of number with it then. Controlled by a lot of genes. So again, there's not normally just one gene which determines then your height, for example. There's lots of different genes. Okay, I'll come back to genes in a minute, what I mean by genes, but it's controlled by a lot of different genes and strongly influenced then by the environment. Okay, so things such as how tall a flower grows depends upon then things such as how much we water it. Okay, what the temperature is, how much light it's getting, all influences the height of that plant then. Discontinuous, though, distinct categories, tends to be qualitative. Okay, basically it means you either have it or you don't have it. Controlled by a few genes, and it's normally not that affected by the environment. So we've mentioned variation, we've mentioned that all people are different. Let's think a little bit then about why we're all different then. What is it which makes us different? What kind of codes us? What carries instructions to make us? Hopefully from first year you learned a bit then about this molecule here. This molecule, of course, then is found inside our cells, and this molecule, of course, then is DNA. Okay, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, but we can thankfully call it simply DNA. So let's learn a bit about DNA then. A few facts about DNA first of all. Well, first fact then is your DNA could stretch from the Earth to the Sun and back 600 times. Your DNA could stretch from the Earth to the Sun and back 600 times. Now, how is that possible? How is that possible at all? Well, again, if we kind of zoom in here, we can think here, every cell in your body, okay, every cell in your body then has then DNA, and the strands in each cell, put them all together, will be 6 foot long, okay, taller than me. Now, in your body, you've got then lots and lots of cells, 100 trillion cells here. So if we put all of the DNA, okay, together end to end, and you've got lots and lots of these cells, put all end to end, what happens, in fact, it would stretch in 110 billion miles, roughly. Okay, it's hundreds of round trips to the sun. So again, we've got a massive amount of DNA inside our cells then. What else can you tell you about DNA then? Well, even though we might look quite different from our friends in our class and maybe our friends at home and maybe even then other people we know on TV and everything else, we're all very, very similar. Okay, our DNA is very, very similar. So we're about 99.9% alike then. So all of it is basically all the DNA, doesn't matter who it is, all the DNA is almost exactly the same. Okay, So 3 million base pairs, and I'll come back in a minute what we mean by base pairs. But all of those pieces of DNA inside our cells, only 0.1% is unique to us. And maybe what's even more alarming then is how much you share then with monkeys. Now monkeys and us share then, well, I don't know, but about 98% then DNA. Okay, even if we compare ourselves even with a cauliflower, that's still about 60% DNA. So again, DNA is common to lots of different organisms. So, then where DNA is found? Well, we know of course it's found inside the nucleus. Now, we know of course we've got the cell membrane of course here, we've got then the cytoplasm here, we know we've got the nucleus of course. Now again inside the nucleus we have then our DNA. Again we kind of zoom into the nucleus. Now again we have the nucleus here, this is kind of it here. Now normally inside the nucleus you can't see that much, it's kind of a big tangled up mess. However, when the cell's dividing, you can start to see these individual chromosomes. One of the experiments we do at A level is we look at garlic tissue and the ends then of garlic roots. And if you do it right, you can see some cells which are dividing. You can see some individual chromosomes. Now, what is a chromosome? Well, you're going to find a chromosome then is the shape of the molecules which contain this DNA. And inside the cells, you've got lots of different chromosomes. You might have heard of an expression called a gene. I don't mean Levi genes. I mean then genes in which you find inside the cells. And we're going to find out then that on one individual chromosome, you could have thousands and thousands and thousands of genes. And every one of those genes carries the instructions for a particular characteristic. Okay, so you could have genes in for eye color, genes for hair color, genes for the shape of your nose, genes for lots of different things. Okay, so a gene then carries instructions for a particular characteristic in your body, and again, the gene is a small section of a chromosome. But where did our DNA actually come from then? Well, if we think of our DNA of course comes from our father and our mother. So this little picture here kind of shows what I mean. So what I have is this is your mom. This here then is your dad then. Okay. Now if we think then your mom or women, then what happened was of course that they have egg cells. Okay, they're born with egg cells. We know of course that as they go through life, then what happens is every month of course an egg cell gets released from the time of puberty to the time of menopause when they stop producing egg cells. So we've got the egg cells here are being produced inside the ovaries, and of course one of those gets released every month. Now men are slightly different. Men of course as they hit puberty they start to produce sperm cells. Here we have the sperm cells here. Say this diagram is not the scale, egg cells are much bigger than sperm cells. But when a couple have sex, the sperm cells then may then meet the egg cells. What happens then is that the actual nucleus from the sperm cell will then fertilize, will fuse with the nucleus from the egg cell, and fertilization will take place. Now when the egg cell becomes fertilized, the cell in fact which is produced then, a fertilized egg cell, is properly called then a zygote. Okay. Now if we think about these chromosomes, well, the egg cells contain 23 chromosomes. The sperm cells, they also contain 23 chromosomes. So when you have the 23 from the sperm cells and the 23 from the egg cells, when they come together, of course, what do you get? You get 46 chromosomes. Okay, we talk about 23 pairs of chromosomes. You'll see why in a second, but we've got 46 chromosomes. That little zygote will, of course, then start to divide and divide and divide. Becomes an embryo, which is kind of the early stage of pregnancy. Becomes a fetus, and then, of course, when it's born, becomes then a baby. So our chromosomes, of course, came from our father and our mother. If we look to see what the actual chromosomes look like, as I said before, you can't see the chromosomes unless the cell is dividing. But when the cell is dividing, what we can do in fact is we can take a photograph of the cell. We can see the individual chromosomes. What we can do in fact, we can actually start to match them up. The chromosomes are different sizes and different shapes, so we can start to match them up then. Also, we can do chemical analysis to kind of find the matching chromosomes. If we do that, you're going to find, take all the photographs of all different chromosomes, put them together like this, you get something which looks a little bit like this here. Okay, this is our human genome. Now, if you count here, you're going to find we have then here, you've got then 23 pairs then of chromosomes. Okay, there's a pair there, of course, pair 1, pair 2, pair 3, etc., etc. So you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now, if we look at one individual pair, okay, let's choose pair 6, why not? If we choose an individual pair, you're going to find, in fact, then that one of that pair comes from your father, and one of that pair then comes then from your mother. Okay, so we're saying that in each pair you've got then one coming from your father and one coming from your mother. Now, that's how these things work, and that's why, of course, we have pairs of chromosomes, 23 pairs, because one of each pair is from your dad and one of each pair is from your mum. Now, what we actually have here is we have then a picture then of the chromosomes from a boy. Well, what we have, in fact, then is we've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22 pairs which look very, very similar. And the last pair, in fact, then you're going to find looks quite different. You've got one long one and you've got one short one. If you look at the letters, you're going to find that the long chromosome, the last one, is called X, and the very last one, in fact, then is called then a Y. So we know then this is a boy because he has an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. If it was a girl, in fact, they'd have two X chromosomes. In fact, that's quite important because some diseases are actually more common in boys because they are missing, I suppose you could call it, we're missing a part of a chromosome then. And that's diseases like color blindness, for example, are more common in boys than girls because of this then. So we'll say boys have XY, girls have 2 X chromosomes then. Let's look then about the structure of a DNA molecule. Now, people compare then a DNA molecule then with a set of ladders. If you think about a set of ladders, well, a set of ladders you might use to climb up onto the roof, you're going to find, of course, you've got sides of the ladder and we've got rungs to that ladder. Well, the sides of the ladder are made up of a structure then called a sugar. Okay, in the case of DNA, that is deoxyribose, but it's a kind of sugar. And also what they have is they have phosphate molecules too. Kind of this bit here then, okay, if I can kind of draw it here or trace it here, that then is what's called the sugar phosphate backbone. You're going to find we have 2 of these sugar phosphate backbones in an individual DNA molecule. Now the rungs of the ladder, well, the rungs of the ladder here, they're made up of bases. So these are bases here, bases here, bases here. Okay, so we have then these different bases then. Now, what is unusual then about these bases is that the bases always pair up then in a certain way. Now, if I show you kind of what I mean by that, we have here, in fact, then bases here. So this here represents the rungs of the ladder. This here then represents then the sides, I suppose, of the ladder you call them then. Okay. Now, if we think about these bases, there are, in fact, then only 4 different kinds of base. We've got ones then which are T, okay, they're called thymine. Ones which are A, which are called adenine. One which is C, which is called cytosine, and one which is G, which is called guanine. So only 4 different bases. Now again, people thought the DNA was too simple because if we need to carry all the instructions to make somebody, we only really have 4 different bases. That's like then trying to write lots and lots of books only using 4 different letters. So for a long time, people thought that DNA was too simple. But we now know, of course, then that DNA is very complicated, very, very long, lots and lots and lots and lots of bases in there. And the order of those bases then will determine then what, in fact, we look like. Now, base pairs are important. Okay, what we have is you've got base pairs here. And A and T will always join together. And then we also then have G's and C's will always join together. If then for some unknown reason the G tried then to go with a T, what happens, in fact, is the actual two longer strands, and they get the wrong distance apart, and the actual DNA would not form properly. So A's always need to match with T's, and G's always need to match with C's then. And that then is what we mean by base pairs. So that's a bit then about the structure of DNA. Okay, we said the shape is called a double helix. Okay, the helix is A structure then which some people call a spiral. Okay, so a spiral is when you have then, if you think it's spiral is when you have a line like this here. Okay, that's a spiral. When it's on a page like that or on a screen, it's 2 dimensions. It's what we call a spiral. Okay, if then, however, if we kind of drew a spiral and then kind of draw up from the page, that's called a helix. Sometimes, for example, people might talk about a spiral staircase. It's not a spiral staircase, it's a helical staircase. Okay, and what happens is a DNA molecule, because it has 2 different strands, we call it a double helix. Okay, so that's the shape of a DNA molecule. So we've learned now a bit about variation. We've learned also then about DNA. Sometimes though DNA can go wrong. Now again, if we think about this DNA molecule, we said of course it carries all the instructions to make a living organism. So whether it needs to grow or reproduce or function in any kind of way, it needs to have, of course, this DNA molecule in. Okay, DNA codes for all these things which the organism has in. Sometimes everything can go wrong. Like for example, when a new cell is made in your body at the minute, then you've got lots and lots of cells being made. Then, okay, thousands of cells being made every single second. Okay, every time a new cell needs to get made, what happens in fact then is that the old cell needs to copy the DNA so it can pass it into these 2 new cells. So one cell divides to become 2 cells. So we need to copy this DNA. That's a very difficult process. It's a bit like you going into the main library then in your town and trying to copy all the books in the library without making a single mistake. And that's what, in fact, then that's what your cells do all the time. They copy in this massive amount of information and very, very rarely actually making a mistake in. However, mistakes can take place, and those mistakes then are called mutations. Okay, this word mutation then is an important word then. That's a mistake in the DNA. Sometimes it's a whole extra chromosome. Sometimes it's a very, very small change in the chromosome, but again, it can have very, very serious consequences then. It might mean, for example, that the protein does not form properly, and again, the cell might not work properly then. Now, there's different diseases caused because of this then. Now, also, as you go through life, every time that the cells get copied, maybe once, very rarely, but maybe the odd time you might get a mutation which takes place in. And over time, more and more mutations build up, and of course that leads to diseases then. Now we know cancer is caused by mutations, and also Alzheimer's is caused by mutations then. The cancer is when the cells start to grow out of control. And what happens in fact is the cells start to grow out of control, starts to invade other cells around it, and starts to damage the other cells in. Alzheimer's again caused by mutations, and that's when people, unfortunately, who are a bit older, might start to forget things then. Okay, that then is Alzheimer's, and both of these things are caused then by mutations. Obviously, we don't want these mutations to take place. Some things do cause these mutations, and we want to try and avoid those things. So smoking contains tar contains chemicals which cause then more mutation to take place. Also, if we're out in the sun too often, again, the UV light from the sun can also cause more mutations to take place, which leads, of course, into things like skin cancer then. So we want to try and avoid smoking, of course, or else too much sun. So that's a bit then about what variation is and different kinds of variation. Also, we're talking then a little bit then about DNA and the structure of DNA and how it works. And also, lastly, talking a bit then about DNA and disease. So, what? Well, year 10, we have a few things for you to do. You're going to find we have, of course, then we've got then a handout on this unit. Okay, if you haven't got it a hard copy yet, you're going to find it on Google Classroom. There's a copy of the handout. We ask if you can then to print out the handout and then to fill in the handout then. Now that's might be quite difficult in some cases. For example, you're going to find that some of the things you need to do in the handout involves then you taking measurements from different people. Okay, that might be getting somebody's height, for example. It might be asking them maybe if they can roll their tongue or not. And obviously, if you can't go outside and you have to stay at home, that's more difficult. So what I want you to do then is things like height. You can maybe phone your friends and ask them what their height is, or maybe phone your family and ask what the height is, so as you can do one of the first tasks in there as well. And so again, try and work your way around this and try then and get as many results as you can, so as you can plot then your graphs then. Now, once then you have done that, of course, there's other things to fill in there as well. Again, you're going to find a lot of this material is in your textbook. So find it in your textbook then, in terms of variation. Also, the glossary, of course, at the back of the textbook will help you then to put in some definitions. If you get stuck as well, of course, you can just turn to Google, and that will also help you get down to these answers here as well. And once you have filled in then the actual pamphlet, I'm going to put up some questions then in terms of inheritance, which we want you then to fill in and then send back to us so we can mark it. And also we're going to put a quiz in there as well. And so again, there's lots of things that I want you to do in terms of inheritance and variation. There's a wee quiz on there, quiz on there. And again, if you could do that when you get everything finished, and put your full name on there just so we can see kind of who has done the quiz, so we know who's kind of finished that section of the course in. So that's all for me for today. Hopefully then you have understood some of it. You have maybe learned a little bit then about DNA and how it works. How information gets passed on. And now please go on now and complete pamphlets, do the questions, do the quiz, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.